Check. And we're back for take two. After that minor tech glitch, this is take two for the Moriah Nightly News on this Wednesday edition for this April, or yeah, it's April, May 27th, 2026. From the nation, Moriah, this is the Moriah Nightly News, as long as our technology cooperates. So the Iran war is in a ceasefire still. And right now, the deal that is being brokered is held up over the enrichment material, what to do with that material. There is talk over nations like Russia and China taking that material and holding it. I don't know if they intend on holding that for our behalf or what, as if they have ever had our best interests at heart, because they have not. And so that is what Iran has agreed to. They had agreed to that, but I don't think that's how it's going to play out. The Iranians are resistant to dismantling that program, the nuclear program. Both sides of both the Iranians and the U.S. seem to downplay the skirmish that took place on Monday as we were coming on the air. This was, of course, what I was attempting to recap before our audio feed cut out, and how rude, I might add. So that's where the Iran front is. What is interesting to note is that the economic sanctions are they are looking for ways to avoid those. And nations like Qatar seem to be helping those with trying to mediate unfreezing assets up to 24 billion, as the Wall Street Journal noted. So with that being said, I'm not convinced that there won't be more bombing before this is done with. I've said that before, and the president has not listened to my advice or my opinion. So we'll see how that goes. That is where that stands right now. I do believe that there will be, but it's a matter of when. Europe is also concerned over Russia and Putin's rhetoric over potential conflict or widening of the war in Ukraine, threatening places like Latvia and Baltic states, threatening to widen that war with airstrikes and things like that, to possibly test the NATO alliance, of course, with the president being not only upset, but questioning the usefulness of the alliance in the wake of the Iran conflict. But the question remains of whether Russia is capable of doing that, given the heavy losses they have seen in the wake of the war with Ukraine. And their troop losses have been in the thousands per day, according to what the Wall Street Journal noted. So it's not clear whether that's just talk with no action. So the one thing that was noted is, as they put it, right-wing politicians in Europe, and I'm not as well versed in European politics as here in the US, or as I am with American politics, But the question of wanting to both end the war in Ukraine, but also wanting to begin buying Russian oil. And to me, that seems like a contradiction in terms when, if you don't like Putin, why buy oil from him in the first place when it seems like you are just giving life to a monster by doing that? So, with that, it seems like the simple solution would be to buy elsewhere, and American oil is pumping strongly. Here, around the Middle East, elsewhere was Israel in Gaza was noted that they have advanced slightly since the ceasefire there in October. And there is a lot of weariness on the part of Israel to be done with not only the Hamas issue, but the Hezbollah issue and the Iranian one. And more will follow on that, or will follow that. But I note that to stand against the rise in anti Semitism, anti Israel, and anti Jewish sentiment here at home. Speaking of things here at home, yesterday in Ticonderoga, which continues to be the dominating the headlines around the region, and it would be noteworthy also that there are best meetings in other communities, like North Alba and others, from what I've seen on Facebook. But there was a public safety meeting in the community building in the basement at 8 a.m. yesterday morning. And residents there was a group of around 7 or 8 or so that were able to go out and see what took place there. And concerns were raised over the evacuation plans of what would take place in an emergency situation for the residents in those places were this to go through. Now, what it appeared to be was that the members of that committee or board or whatever they would be tended to downplay the concerns of those there and say that it was not up to them, it was up to the town board. And that might be the case, but they are a public safety committee, and public safety would be concerned with anything to do with fires and chemical explosions and whatnot, I would think. So that was one of the issues that was raised by those in attendance, and questions swirling at the meeting also of political corruption and things of that nature happening in the Ticonderoga town government. And so that was the report of what took place at the meeting, and whether there are merits to those. We are still looking to investigate those concerns and what took place there. We did contact the Adirondack Park Agency on Monday. I mentioned calling on Monday. A representative did call back today, and unfortunately, I was not able to respond to the call as I would have liked to have, being held up by another obligation. But in his voicemail, the representative noted that the BEST project is under permit, is in the preliminary review process, is how he phrased it in his message. So that is something that I will be swiftly following up on. But I was pleased at most to be able to get a call back from them. at all, given who they are and their wicked ways. So, with that, we will continue to also follow the BESS issue and the lithium battery project as it comes out, and press press the APA on why they would allow any of the lithium battery or the solar panels to come into the Adirondack Park to begin with, because that is a question that many residents here in Ticonderoga, Moriah, and the surrounding region want to know, myself included. So there and many deserve to, and that's something that we all deserve to know as folks who live here and work here, and it should be noted and exposed for what it is. So, with that being said, we move forward into our business spotlight. And before I move on to that, I do also want to note that there were some concerns after that meeting in Ticonderoga, over the quorum at public meetings, and as it got a little bit heated. And so, with of course, the emotions and things like that running high over this issue, respect, courtesy, all of that should be noted. We here in America, we do not live in an oligarchy or or tyranny, or any of that is not on these shores yet. We are a free nation, and the government works for us and not the other way around. And we have to hold them accountable for that reason. And so I would urge, of course, that same level of cooperation, respect, mutual respect, and all of that. And with that, I never did not mention it on air, but when I went to the first meeting, I was pleased to see the amount of support, encouragement, and amount of thankfulness and gratitude shown for the Ticonderoga Police Department when everyone was so vocal in opposition at that meeting. But I just thought that was such an encouragement to see for the Ticonderoga PD. So now I will move to the business spotlight, and that is one that is lesser known, as much of the businesses so far have been somewhat well known. But this one is not, and a lot of businesses I'm finding in the Adirondacks, or in our region, in our listening or viewing area, are not as well known as you might think. And such is the case, I believe, with the Knights. The Knights is one called Brevenly Global, which I hope I pronounced that correctly. And they operate, of course, well beyond the Adirondacks or our region, but they have worked to establish a footprint here in our area through Kelly Bilo. And some of us here in Moriah might recognize that name, for those of us who had her husband Todd as our English teacher at MCS over the years. But they are a naturopathic supplement is pretty much what they specialize in. And they are a health and wellness company built on the pillars of courage, integrity, and impact. Always expanding and looking to support what the body is naturally designed by God, I might add, to do. And to support energy, metabolism, sleep, focus, gut health, and overall well being. And I might add, as a personal word, that Kelly's testimony as to how these products had influenced and impacted her own personal health is inspiring and encouraging in itself. And of course, she, being a nurse for well over 25 to 30 years, would know. And you can contact Kelly on her Facebook page, and that is up for anyone interested. And she is the contact person. I did have a QR code that I could have shared, and probably should have, but with the 9 o'clock hour approaching and wanting to try and standardize our viewing time, um, I could not get it on the scene schedule or whatever you call it, the block for our software here. But it is there for anyone who wants it. She is there and very active on social media, so I recommend giving her a shout out for that and focusing on your mental and physical health always. And as we continue to move along in our Moriah focus tonight, was the meeting last night for the Port Henry Firehouse and what they are hoping to accomplish there in building a new firehouse or fire station. Not much new information was reported that I had not already given you on previous reports. If you recall, they're they are looking at about 2/3 of the project being funded by an outside grant. I did find out that the grant comes directly from the USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture. So that's some more in-depth information. That's a $3.3 million grant. And the other third of that money would be a $1.6 million bond on the local tax levy. And if you recall from Monday's broadcast, I said it would be about $74 per 100,000 on your tax assessment. And depending on how much your property is assessed for, is probably how much, well, it is how much you would bear the burden. And if you saw our pictures last night, that was a clear breakdown from their presentation on how much in exact dollar amounts that would add to your taxes if you live in the Port Henry Fire District. That number three, Port Henry number three, is just that there are three districts in the town of Moriah, with Moriah being number one, Mineville Weatherby being number two, and Port Henry being number three. Now, I did ask Port Henry Fire Chief Jimmy Hughes about consolidation, as I had raised the question both here on air and in the meeting. And it was met with courtesy and respect, and I appreciated that. And one of the things that he noted was being cut off 3 times in his 40 plus years of service, the geography of the area, and also noting some of the other things that the fire department does here with water rescue, the jaws of life, other things like that. And of course, my raising, and I do want to point out as an editorial note of judgment that my raising the question was in no way meant to be an insult to any of the fine men and women who have served this community in the Port Henry Fire Department or any of the 3 fire departments at all. And I certainly want to thank everyone who serves this community in any capacity, and especially our fire department, and for that. Interestingly, at the meeting, because he was in attendance, our town supervisor, Matt Brassard, noted that more money from the project to cover that $1.6 million could come from New York State if they see that it's already well funded elsewhere. Albany may want to throw money at it. They're quite good at throwing money at other things, so I would hope that they would throw it at something that looks more useful. So all of the details are online at a website, www.porthenryfire.com. You can go there and view the entire PowerPoint presentation, which will break down all of the financial figures, the floor plans of what that firehouse would look like. And it's about 7,000 square feet, and it would include community input on what the exterior of that would look like as well as it goes along. So, which is important, I think, for community involvement. community involvement is very important regardless. And so, if this is an issue that is important to you, I urge you to vote either way, yes or no, on June 2nd from noon to 9 p.m. at the Fort Henry Firehouse at 11 Church Street. Involvement in any part of the political process, especially here locally, is important when on the local level, politically, is where you have the most amount of say in your political process. And so, if you don't like what's going on, then be the change you would like to see. And so, finally, to end tonight's news and the final story that I wanted to cover, because every other news outlet is covering it and they rightly should cover it. But our own John, geez, we're cutting out again. We're having all kinds of issues. Our own, not that long this time, our own John Nedgy of Witherby was honored at the state capitol this past week. I believe that was yesterday in Albany, at the invitation of our state senator Dan Steck, and he was inducted into the Veterans Hall of Fame. Mr. Nedgy just turned 100 years old, if you recall, not that long ago, and it's just a great story from our greatest generation. He was honorably discharged in 1946 after he served in General George S. Patton's Third Army in the European theater during World War II. And so I want to wish Mr. Nedgy well, and all of those who remain in our greatest generation of the living heroes among us. And there are not many of them left, but they have always been heroes, and as they decline in numbers, are certainly national treasures. So finally, whether we have tech issues or not, that is the Moriah Nightly News for this Wednesday evening. Be sure to like and subscribe and share us across the board on YouTube, Facebook, and push our algorithm as far as possible. We have, of course, that sponsorship still going on there. If you would like to be featured on our business spotlight, give us a shout out. You can contact me there. And have a good evening and good night.